Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for episode 101 of the Porcupine Report. Of course, we come to you every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. with a brand new episode. Be sure to follow the Free State Project wherever you enjoy receiving your podcasts. You can follow us on X and Facebook and Spotify and YouTube. This is where we post every single Wednesday. And we're also on many of your favorite podcasting apps. And wherever you're following us, please be sure to like and share, leave a positive comment. It does make a difference as we work to reach broader and broader audiences about the great things that are happening in the advancement of liberty here in New Hampshire, with conversations of people who are making it happen both here in New Hampshire and around the country. The fight for liberty is everywhere. Of course, you know, we're the tip of the spear here in the Free State. And we're very proud of that fact. A few things before we get into our conversation for today with our guest, who I'm looking forward to having back on the show. I'll tell you about him in a moment. I want to say thank you to our sponsors. And of course, one of our sponsors is Porcupine Coffee Roasting, I do believe. It's a good cup of coffee. And now here's the thing about Porcupine Coffee Roasting. It's a coffee roasting company. It's a private membership association, and it's run by Free Staters. And there are some other coffee roasting companies here in New Hampshire who don't like Free Staters. I'm not going to give them any free advertising by naming them, but they've made it very clear they do not like Free Staters and they want us out, even though these folks who run this business that doesn't like us very much, they just moved here from Virginia a couple years ago, bringing their like imperial attitudes with them. Well, you know what? You don't need to drink their status swill when you've got Porcupine Coffee Roasting. Wherever you are in the country, they can ship right to you. They import specialty grade beans, roast them fresh here in New Hampshire, and ship them out to you wherever you are in the country. Even if you're out in, I don't know, some barren landscape like Idaho, they can get you coffee beans roasted with the Free State spirit right to you, so you can have that Free State spirit in your step. So go to porcupinecoffeeroasting.com and use our discount code PORCREPORT for 15% off individual orders. And not only are you going to be saving a little bit of money, but a little bit of your purchase will go to support this show. So that's a win-win-win all around. Porcupine Coffee Roasting. It's good. It's good stuff. You should have some. All right. And I also want to thank our other sponsor, which is the Independence Inn. If you are planning a trip to New Hampshire because you aren't fortunate enough to live here yet, then you definitely want to take a porcupine vacation. And our friends at the Independence Inn are exactly the ones who can help you do that. This is a historic bed and breakfast owned and operated today by Free Staters, and their mission is to be basically a place where you can lay your head when you are here visiting the Free State. And they know all the communities. They can point you in the right direction where events are happening so you can maximize your time here in New Hampshire. And if you go to nhindependenceinn.com, and when you sign up to stay there, you know, if you stay for like a week, they'll give you 50% off if you tell them the Free State Project sent you. That's such a great deal. They must not even be making money on this. They just really want people who love liberty more opportunities to come and visit New Hampshire and experience the Free State community. So please be sure to take advantage of our friends at the Independence Inn, because they want you to take advantage of what they've built there. So come and visit, have a porcupine vacation any time of year, 52 weeks a year. Pick one. You won't regret it. You'll have a great time here in the freest state in America. So thank you to our friends at Independence Inn. Of course, we're going to be talking about today. We are coming up. By the time this episode airs, it will be 8 days until the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, just 8 days away. Do you have your tickets yet? You really should. In fact, this week, we really want to get those ticket sales in because we have to order food And we're always kind of like trying to estimate, a lot of people in our community tend to be kind of the people who wait to the last minute to get tickets. I don't know why you would be that way. Well, I'm that way sometimes myself. I can't fault you, but really, sincerely, please go to nhlibertyforum.com right now. Keep in mind, if you pause the episode, go to nhlibertyforum.com right now and get your tickets. All right. And you can use my discount code Pork Report to save 5% on your tickets. And I'm going to pull it up right here on my computer right now because I want to walk you through some of the things that are happening. So if you decide you're going to miss out, I don't know you would, at least you'll know everything you're missing because this is going to be a great conference. Not only do we have great keynote speakers coming in, including Scott Horton and Tom Woods, but I'm looking at the website right here, and you can go to nhlibertyforum.com and look at the schedule. We're going to be hearing from great speakers. We're kicking off the day on Friday, hearing from Bruce Fenton and Matt Kibbe. Matt Kibbe, is former president of Freedom Works and runs Free the People now. He's going to be talking about the PorcFest parking lot as a model for social change. We're going to be hearing from Jeremy Corden, the CEO of Goldback, and a whole bunch of conversations around monetary and emerging new currencies. When we get into Friday afternoon, we're going to hear from Jody Underwood on why education is the thing that is making everyone lose their minds as we have been advancing school choice and education freedom here in New Hampshire. It's going to be a great panel discussion on how we restore the freedom to build housing here in New Hampshire. We are going to hear from in Friday afternoon, House Majority Leader Jason Osborne. We're going to hear from our guest for today's program, Dan McKnight. And of course, we're going to round out the evening with Scott Horton. Going into Saturday, we have on our main stage, we're going to hear from Ian Hewitt on Right to Try. This is nullifying the federal government and the FDA telling terminally ill patients they can't try non-FDA approved medications when they're trying to save their own lives. We're going to be hearing from that. We're going to be hearing from a man who really helped build the direct primary care network in Maine on how we restore the direct doctor-patient relationship, Dr. Michael Champy. We're going to hear from Angela McCardle and Carla Garrick and Bonnie Freeman on the value of freeing our libertarian political prisoners who've been targeted by the federal government. Then we go into Saturday afternoon. We're building a main stage event, which hasn't been announced yet. So we've got a placeholder there. But then we're going to go into a block around emerging technologies. We're going to hear from Representative Keith Ammon about energy, computing, and sound money as what we can do with state policy to advance a sovereign libertarian state around these issues. We're going to hear from Julia Cartwright on the future of nuclear power and things that are happening with next generation nuclear power technology like thorium. We're going to hear from Scott Scheller about the Malay Revolution taking place in Argentina, from Jim Babka about restoring America's libertarian anti-ideology. And we're going to finish out the evening with keynote remarks and our VIP keynote dinner from the great Tom Woods, who was our guest on last week's program. And I haven't even mentioned the 8 dialogues that are taking place, deep dive conversations into homesteading, and my personal favorite, I'm going to be leading a dialogue on should the 2nd District of Maine break away and join a greater New Hampshire, and so many other conversations in these small, intimate group conversations to deep dive into issues like those. So that's what you're going to be missing out on if you don't get your ticket to the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. So get your ticket, nhlibertyforum.com. I really want to see you there. We've sold, we're approaching 200 tickets. And we want to hit that 200 ticket threshold. Love to get even higher than that. So get your tickets now. nhlibertyforum.com. Use my discount code PorkReport, save 5%. You owe it to yourself to be there and to save a few bucks while you're at it. And of course, I also want to mention to you, get my new book, The Liberty Candidate's Practical Guide to Door Knocking, available on Amazon.com for just $10. If you are someone who has ever thought about running for office, or you know someone you're supporting, they want to read this book. Door knocking is the gold standard of campaigning, and I've literally written the book on it. You want it. And all proceeds go to benefit the Free State Project. And one last final call to action is go to our website, fsp.org, sign up for the FSP newsletter. We send it every single Sunday, and you don't want to miss that. So get the FSP newsletter, and while you're there, consider becoming a patron. Last I checked, we were up to 292 Porcupine patrons, and I really would love to reach 300 by this time next month. So if you've thought about becoming a Porcupine patron, go to fsp.org/give. Sign up. You could do it for as little as $100 a year. You get an awesome Porcupine patron lapel pin, which confers benefits at FSP events like the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, where you get complimentary access to our VIP lounge. You get access to our exclusive patron print newsletter. You get access to our patron signal group, and so many benefits. You can learn more at fsp.org/give, and it's tax deductible. So you're literally taking money away from the war machine and giving it to Liberty. So it's a great thing to do. Become a Porcupine patron, and thank you to all of our Porcupine patrons who make the year-round mission of the Free State Project possible. All right. Those are the things I wanted to promote. Let's get into our conversation with our guest today, who is, in fact, he runs an organization that is sponsoring the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, and he's going to be one of our speakers at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum for 2 years in a row. We're really glad to have him back, and we're glad to have him on this show. He is Dan McKnight from Bring Our Troops Home. Dan, welcome to the Porcupine Report.
Thank you, sir. Coming to you from Idaho, where I think we can get some of that good porcupine coffee, as you mentioned earlier in the show.
Yeah, you can get it sent all the way out there. I'm not sure. I can't remember where Idaho ranks on the Freedom in the 50 State Index, but I know it's not number one. So
it certainly is not number one.
But you guys got some good stuff going on over there. You guys are like one of the few states like New Hampshire that's leading on Defend the Guard. So that's exciting. That separates like the boys from the men.
And we do have the largest nuclear energy lab in the entire world. Nuclear energy first lit a light bulb right here in Idaho.
All right, well, that's something to be proud of.
There we go.
We're looking to pioneer a lot more nuclear energy here in New Hampshire as well. We got our one nuclear facility, but I want those modular nuclear reactors in every single backyard. That's what I want. So, so Dan, part of inviting you to come on the program, of course, we're looking forward to having you at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. But I've had guests on the program already, like Representative Tom Mannion and Representative Michael Granger, talking about Defend the Guard issues going through the House and going through the Senate. And recently, as you know, but our audience may not know, there was a public hearing for Defend the Guard in the Senate Finance Committee of New Hampshire. I was one of the individuals who showed up to testify on it, along with a few others. And it was a little alarming that the way that hearing was conducted, the Senate chairman basically insisted that no one read their testimony that they had prepared to facts and figures and arguments and all of that. Thankfully, I'm pretty good on my feet. But insisted no one read their testimony. He said, we are literate. We can read the testimony for ourselves. We want you to have a talk and a conversation with us. He even actively interrupted Representative Tom Mannion when he was presenting the bill, saying, sounds like you're reading to me. And so it's well, you're trying to respect people's time, right? So you prepare things ahead of time. He interrupted him kind of to try to throw him off. And then for all the promises they were going to read everyone's testimony, the moment it was the public hearing was done, they went into immediate executive session and voted 8-0 to try to kill the bill. I didn't see them flipping through our written testimony. I kind of feel like I was lied to a little bit.
Lied to by the government? Come on.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen.
It was very revealing. They had no questions for proponents, and a lot of the questions they had for opponents seemed kind of planted and scripted out a little bit, if I were to speculate. Having been on that side of the horseshoe, I can tell you that's exactly what happens. But Dan, I know you sent me a really good podcast breakdown that you did of the entire thing there, and I'll make sure we include that in the weekly newsletter for those who'd like to see that this Sunday. What was your take on the public hearing in New Hampshire? And I will note, just for our audience who might be upset, you should be upset, but the thing we really want this year is a roll call vote in the Senate. I'm speaking on my own behalf, right? The FSP as an org doesn't lobby the legislature. I'm just speaking as an individual here. We want a roll call vote in the Senate, and we still can get a roll call vote in the Senate, even though the committee vote was 8-0. So that's not off the table. But Dan, what was your reaction to all of that?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with a line from one of my favorite movies of all time, the original Top Gun. We are in a target-rich environment, right? We may not have a roll call vote on the entire Senate floor yet, but we do have 8 bad guys now. There are 8 bad guys that have put their name in opposition to defend the guard. And going into that hearing, we had 4 people that showed up to testify in person. 5 people, excuse me, plus the sponsor. There were 2 people opposed. There were 47, I believe, or 46 that signed up online in support of it. And there were none online opposing it. So by my basic Marine Corps math, that's a lot to a little. I think there was a lot more support for it. And you're right, the chairman did scold people and said, don't read your testimony, submit your written testimony, and then have a conversation with us. Well, the chairman forgot that a conversation requires input, it requires receiving, it requires interacting, asking questions, and not one single question was asked of any of the people there supporting the Defend the Guard bill. And at the end, he did say that they would read all of the written submissions and they would discuss it thoroughly in executive session. And the name of our podcast episode, the reaction video to that hearing, is Live Free or Die in 96 Seconds. Because that committee went into executive session for 96 seconds with the president of the Senate sitting down and joining the committee 1 minute before the end of the hearing, not hearing any of the testimony, sitting there for 96 seconds of executive session, and all 8 members jokingly trying to second the motion to kill the bill. They didn't read a single thing. The stage was set, and I think that's kind of the reason it went to the Finance Committee in the Senate instead of the more germane committee where it should have gone. But if you listen to any of the testimony, Eric, and yours was, I've heard you deliver some of the best Defend the Guard testimony ever across the country. You and Pat McGeehan and Ben Adams and Wendy Rogers are probably the people that have delivered the best sponsor testimony ever. But your testimony without notes, without reading, was the best I've ever seen from you. And when you stopped and talked about our friend Aaron Rollins, I could see the pain on your face. I could see the emotion. And I think not being able to read your prepared statements may have caught you a little bit emotionally off guard, because it did me. I don't tear up much, but that one got me. Aaron was a great supporter of Defend the Guard. He had a hard time reconciling his service that he gave to this country, knowing that it was not for the purpose he was told, that it was not done with proper authority. And I thought it was very impactful. And I want to just thank you for sharing that emotional story, because it's not something that's easily done. And it takes a very special deliverance to be able to do it in a non-gratuitous way. So I want to say thank you on behalf of the organization, on behalf of veterans, and I'm going to take some liberty and say thank you on behalf of Aaron Rollins' family as well.
I appreciate it. And I imagine a lot of the audience doesn't know what we're talking about. So maybe I will kind of break it down. And I will say we will, for those who are interested, who want to stick around after this podcast is over, we'll throw in a video of my testimony for those who are interested. But we'll also, I guess in addition to putting your episode, breaking it all down in the newsletter, let's get a link to it. We can put in the show notes for this episode too, so people can more immediately who are curious and want to see that, because your analysis was spot on. But my friend Aaron Rollins was a huge supporter I got to know in Maine when I was running for the U.S. Congress in the 2nd District of Maine. And we spent so much time together, him driving me around to bean suppers and GOP committee meetings. And Aaron was a veteran of the Maine Army National Guard, and he had served multiple tours in Iraq. And he actually was homeless for quite a while when he got back from all that. But he had suffered some real trauma over there, which was he was in a roadside bomb incident, and his combat buddy, who was sitting in the chair of the vehicle where Aaron normally sat himself, was blown to pieces, and Aaron survived. And I think that he not only carried a lot of survivor's guilt about that, but he left that and everything we learned about these wars after the fact, like wondering, like, what was any of this for? Why were we over there? What was the point of all of this? Why did Aaron Rollins was the first person who gave me a copy of Smedley Butler's War as a Racket. He gave that to me when I was running for Congress and put it right in my hands. And what a great read that is. I encourage anyone to read it. It's a very short read, but Aaron was kind of our champion, for kind of grassroots organizing around Defend the Guard in Maine when I was sponsoring the bill. I remember, that public hearing, right, hearing the same arguments from all these adjutant generals we hear state by state, right? They don't bother arguing that the wars are just and that our people are dying for good causes. They just argue that, like, well, what if we stand up to the federal government? The federal government threatens to cut funding from us. And I just remember Aaron Rollins turning to me after we stepped out in the hall and just saying to me, is like, boy, I wish the adjutant general would have the balls to say that to my buddy's mom, right? That your son died, but it was worth it because the state got a few $1 million out of the deal. Not we were defending democracy, not we were like defeating terrorism, not any of that, because nobody believes those arguments anymore for these wars. But we got some Humvees out of it, and so therefore that was worth it. It just seems to me such a when we're dealing with kind of like the Constitution and clear issues of right and wrong, it seems like, I don't know. It just seems like in New Hampshire, like we're willing to tell the federal government to go like pound sand over like the seatbelt law.
That's right.
Like you threaten our highway funds if we're going to require, adults over the age of 18 to wear a seatbelt. Well, F you, we're not giving up our liberties here. But like for sending our sons off into war without a congressional declaration, we're okay with that.
96 seconds and 8-0. Yep.
I mean, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's important to protect the freedom of people not to wear a seatbelt if they don't want to. But I think it's far more important to defend our National Guardsmen from unconstitutional deployments into foreign wars.
I promise the founding fathers spent 0 time on seatbelts when they were writing the Constitution. But the topic they deliberated on more than any was the power to go to war.
I mean, it is implied in the Ninth Amendment.
It is implied. You're right.
But anyway, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do try to mention Aaron Rollins every time I'm talking about Defend the Guard, because I do want to keep his memory alive, because Aaron is
he was a real one.
Yeah. And 17 veterans a day commit suicide. And sadly, Aaron was one of them.
That's correct. And the general did make a couple of flippant comments. We get HIMARS. We get KC-46 aircraft. We get 1,100 jobs to support these aircraft. But you're right. He never did once talk about the actual cost of war. He didn't talk about that the free staters or the people from the Granite State were being bribed with their own tax dollars by the federal government, or they were being held hostage by their own tax dollars. None of that mattered. And in fact, they even dismissed the congressional ability to take us to war, that Congress is required to declare war to change the state of our nation. That wasn't even mentioned as anything other than an inconvenience. And I believe it was Mr. Grady who said that the most convenient mechanism for going to war now is just an AUMF. Well, I'm sorry, we're not talking about convenience. We're not trying to get an expedient way to go to war. We have ways to respond to real threats in real time with very short notice. The president has those abilities to move the military, but to call the National Guard out of their communities, out of Concord, out of Boise, out of Bismarck, and activate them and move them into a federal status is not a response to a real world emergency. That is a planned expeditionary force. And that's the way the National Guard has been used. And that's what we're trying to stop, is that if you're going to use us, just use us the right way. Just declare war. It says so in federal law. And we'd be happy to go. That's why we sign up. We sign up to protect our countries, to protect our states, to be a homeland defense. And when necessarily and properly called upon, we will go and fight and win America's wars.
Yeah. And it seems to me like if Congress doesn't even care enough to like vote on it, then it just really seems like the most like basic thing we're asking for, right? It's not like, we're not even saying like you can't take our troops to war. It's just like the decision makers have to be willing to sign their names to it.
Yeah, let's hold us to the highest standard, not to bypass the standard, but hold us to the highest standard. And I talked about this in my breakdown, that there's federal law that already says that National Guard can be called into federal service to fight wars that Congress has declared or authorized. And that's the highest part of the law, because further down the law, it talks about all the other ways that the National Guard can be called into service for training, for overseas missions, for humanitarian, for emergencies and things like that. And we're not saying that we should bypass the standards. We should just be held to the standard that's already in federal law. Not to mention that the Constitution also clearly says that Congress has the enumerated power to take us into war. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel at all. We're trying to create state alignment with federal law and with the Constitution and with the original intent of the Constitution.
Now, I will say, Dan, I was listening to your podcast, which again we'll have in the show notes and people can go watch. And I really appreciated the way you broke down and responded to the testimony of the Adjutant General. And I will say, I don't know his military background. You kind of highlighted some of it. It sounds like he's kind of had a very distinguished career in the military, and I certainly don't want to, take anything away from that. But it is a little hard to sit there in the audience and he gets to be like one of the last people to go, and him just kind of lay out just a whole bunch of like constitutional fallacies one after another, and just like confusing legal issues, and just have the whole committee there like nodding their heads like it's like what he's saying makes absolute sense. I ended up going up to him afterwards, and I was trying to be respectful. I wasn't trying to be a jerk. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I came across as a jerk, but I was friendly at first. I just said, introduce myself, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, I guess we agree to disagree on this." I said, "I guess so," but I just wanted to say to you, because he invoked like the supremacy clause, and based on what I was hearing him say, basically what he was saying was the supremacy clause means that the federal government gets to do whatever the hell they want, and the states have to just do what they're told. And I just told him, I said, I would really appreciate it if you would, read into the supremacy clause a little bit more, because that's not what it says. It has to be in line with Article 1, Section 8 powers. And we've only given them, the federal government, a finite amount of Article 1, Section 8 powers, and everything else, like the 10th Amendment, applies. Like what you've set up there just totally negates the whole premise of the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And he said, "Oh, well, we've got lawyers who look at these things." And then he got very hostile and like accused me of like, you bring your defund the guard bill from over in Maine, and we didn't ask you to do that. You didn't come and talk to us about it. It's like, all right, I guess I've stepped on something here. He's getting a little defensive and walked away kind of in a huff. Whatever. At
one point in his testimony, he made a comment that was kind of a throwaway line in his testimony, but it kind of tells the whole story. He said, when the president issues an order, when the president tells us what to do, it's our job to just do it. Well, God dang it. We're talking about New Hampshire. This is the live free or die state. Nobody tells Granite Staters what to do. We have inalienable rights that are ours, given to us by our creator, not by a president. And it's not our job to fall in line and, salute yes sir, no sir. But he made it very clear that that's the role of the supremacy clause. He said is that the president gets to tell us what to do. I'm sorry, I don't remember seeing that on PBS, on any afternoon specials in public school. I wasn't taught that in the military. I didn't learn that in college. So at the University of Michaelitis, that's the general's name, there is a new curriculum that teaches us the proper authority of the President of the United States to tell us how to live and what to do. Well, God dang, I don't subscribe to that. I'm not going to be a part of it.
Well, and it certainly does seem to me that it's always seemed to me that, our men and women in military uniform are in a more difficult position to like question orders. I mean, certainly is it's well known, like you're not supposed to follow through with an illegal order, but it's a hard position to be in, to question your orders. And so that is why we have like civilian control of the military, and why it's so important that through our civilian government, our elected office holders are taking responsibility for these decisions rather than just deferring to the unelected. And that certainly seems to be where we are. So it seems that the citizens have an absolute responsibility to question these orders and to make sure there are accountability structures in place.
I know when I was 18, young and dumb and full of testosterone, there was not a fight I wouldn't have run right into headlong. But that's why we put civilians in control, wise stewards of when our country gets to commit blood and treasure. Because if you left it in the hands of every 18-year-old male, we'd be fighting everybody on earth and anytime. And I give as an example, weekend liberty. When you're in the military and you get weekends off, we would go to the bars and we would fight. That's what we did because that was our nature. And we can't let that type of mentality lead our country into every conflict in every corner of the earth. And that's why the founding fathers spent so much time putting the responsibility to change the condition of our nation in the hands of our representatives. Because the executive branch has very clear and delineated purposes and authorities that we gave to them, and so does Congress. And the problem that we have, that our organization fights for, and I know you do too, is that when we give them the authority, they do not have the ability or the authority to give that away to somebody else. And that's what Congress has done. They've given away our authority, our permission that we gave to them. They've given away to the executive branch. And then, Mr. Grady made one final comment. Actually, I think it was Senator Lang that made the comment that he had heard somewhere, which is very authoritative, that when Congress agrees to fund something, that is a de facto declaration of war. What a wild misunderstanding of the Constitution, that some action after the fact retroactively authorizes it before the fact. It's just completely backwards. And I think most of those people that were testifying probably went to public schools. And I guess, dang it, we've got to do more work on our public schools, because someone's being taught wrong or it's just being parroted incorrectly. But that was one of the most telling moments of that hearing.
Yeah, and it's just so backwards. You would expect a lawmaker to know better, because, I mean, any lawmaker knows, like, you pass a budget just because you fund something, unless there is like enabling, like, statutory language around that, the funding can't actually be spent if it's not like for something that's been authorized in statute.
And so, by that same model, though, Eric, it also can't be taken away either, right? And so if there is statutory provisions that say that this is where the money is supposed to go, and then it's appropriated by Congress, it can't be willy-nilly withheld, which is the other argument that the general and his supporter, Mr. Grady, kept saying, is the National Guard will just take the money away. Well, it's not that easy. There are so many stakeholders involved in deciding where every single dollar of military spending goes. And it starts actually with the Convention of Governors, or the Council of Governors. The states send representatives of the governor to these conferences to decide how much money and how much funding is coming to their state for National Guard equipment and personnel and pay and allowances to keep their National Guard prepared and ready. So if they're ever called upon for actual defense missions that are legally authorized, that we have the resources we need. So they're not going to be able to take away the money arbitrarily. And that's the biggest argument that they keep saying. And it started with our dear friend, Liz Cheney in Wyoming, when she told the State House there 6 years ago that if they passed Defend the Guard, she would personally make sure that they lost 2 C-130 aircrafts and she'd send them off to Texas. That's where that story came from. And it's just been multiplied over the years, and no general, no National Guard Bureau official, no politician will ever put their name on that claim. Nobody, ever. Nobody will make the claim and put their name on it and hang their hat on it.
Yeah. Well, there's two things I want to, hit at here. I mean, first of all, second thing I want to get to, I just want to say it out loud to make sure that we do get to it, because I thought you broke down in your podcast pretty brilliantly kind of the breakdown between Title 10 and Title 32 missions, and which the adjutant general seemed to be. I would think that he would understand this better than he seemed to present it. Being, the position that he's in, I would hope that he understands it better, and hopefully he was just being deceptive and conflating things, because I would think that understanding the difference between these two things should be like a requirement for the role that he's in. But before we get to that, I do just want to talk about Daniel Webster, because, one thing I love about New Hampshire is outside the State House, there is the statue of Daniel Webster, who is, U.S. Secretary of State, one of our great kind of early kind of great men from New Hampshire. And of course, he was a huge critic of the War of 1812, and particularly, I think it was the Madison administration at the time that was conducting this. Up in New England, people were not bought into this war on Canada that they had decided to fight, and it was Daniel Webster who was concerned about the federal government commandeering the state militias and using them for this purpose. And he said it would be the duty of the states to interpose between the federal, their own state militias, and the arbitrary and inappropriate use of them by the federal government. And here we are today. We still, the Constitution is still the Constitution. The militia clause is still the militia clause. The responsibility for Congress to declare war is still the Article 1, Section 8 power. Like, none of those things have changed. Maybe just, how our leaders want to interpret these things for convenience. What would you have to say about Daniel Webster's words and the degree to which that people in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire legislature, might want to understand about this great man that we revere?
No, I think your reference to him was brilliant. And I wish that we could have just put the committee at ease, adjourned for just a moment, and taken a little field trip outside the building, and then had the rest of your testimony in the shadow of the Daniel Webster statue, because his words are heavy. And if you think about what he said, it shall be the duty It shall be the duty of the states to interpose between their own militia and the arbitrary power of the federal government. Not that they should, not that they can, but it is their duty. When the federal government is doing things the federal government's not authorized to do, the states are our only leverage, our only power to get the federal government back in check. It's not by electing some bum and sending him off to Washington, D.C. That doesn't work. It's by using our authority as citizens to lobby our legislatures and have our legislatures rein back control. And what has happened, and I kind of blame Idaho for this, and we had a senator in the early 90s, his name was Dirk Kempthorne. He was pretty much a do-nothing senator. He served, I think, 2 terms. He had one piece of legislation that had his name on it. It was called the No Unfunded Mandates bill. And at first, it sounds really conservative. It sounds like a really great idea that the federal government can't tell you what to do unless they give you the money to do it. So they can't force you to do something unless they fund it. Well, the federal government, being as corrupt as they are, they did just that, but they turned it on its head. They said, thank you, Senator Kempthorne. Now we know that if we give you the money, we can tell you exactly what to do. And that's been kind of the breakdown of our society. And I blame my state for it. We've had some great senators. We had William Borah, we had Frank Church, and then we had the Dutch to the world right here on the Porcupine Report for that layup we missed. But that is what I would want our states to understand, that it's not a responsibility. It's not a nicety to have. It's the state legislature's responsibility. They shall interpose. And you can insert anything here you want between the militia and the federal government, between the transportation dollars and the state's rights to not wear a seat, whatever you want. It's the state's duty to interpose, because when we get to that point where we only have one point of reference, one leverage point where we can impact, and it's the states, we have to have that fulcrum of the Constitution, that piece that says, hey, apply pressure here and we'll multiply your effect. And that's the one thing the states need to understand. And that's why we quit fighting in Washington, D.C. We tried that for about 1 minute. And we said, we'll never go back and fight there again. We're going to fight in the states. I'd rather fight 50 winnable battles than one losable war. And I just wish people would really recognize what you're doing with the Free State Project, what Defend the Guard's about, what all these nullification efforts, the 10th Amendment Center. This is all the remnant trying to restore the constitutional principles that our founding fathers built.
People often, it's Washington, D.C. is the circus, right? It
Right.
gets all the attention, all the, all the eyeballs go there, all the media, all the cameras are focused there. But it's just the circus. Like, what are they don't really do. Our elected officials in Washington, D.C., like, they don't really do anything other than like seek the spotlight, right? Very few things actually change in Congress. Most of the decisions have been outsourced to the unelected, so that you can have this kind of division between the actual decision makers and accountability. So the elected officials can say, all right, we sent a strongly worded letter to the real decision makers that we don't like what they're doing, but I can't do anything about it. Won't you vote for me for re-election? But
and don't forget to send your dollars.
Yes, please send a donation, or some social issue or another is gonna, they're gonna do something. They use these things to distract us, while the real big decisions around war and central banking are out of the hands of our elected officials, apparently. But on the state level, we just have to have state legislatures with the backbone to assert their sovereignty, because the Constitution is the Constitution. It's still there. We need to resurrect some of these things that people have forgotten, like the 10th Amendment. But let's hop into, and this might get a little technical, but you understand this a lot more than me. Like, boy, if I had to go up there and contradict the Adjutant General on Title 10 and Title 32, I would not have been able to explain it the way you were able to in your podcast. So can you explain to people what the difference is between these two titles that affect kind of the legal missions for the National Guard, and why it's important to understand the distinction between these two when we're talking about, foreign wars and the threat of federal funding?
Absolutely. And I'll keep it high level so that we don't lose your viewers, because it does get down in the weeds and gets a little bit nerdy. But there's 2 codes of U.S. law that govern the National Guard and being activated and funded and what gives them the authority. The first one I'll start with is Title 32. And when the National Guard is serving domestically, when they're under the governor's control, the governor's the commander-in-chief, but they're receiving federal funds. This is for training, for readiness, for emergency response, for COVID relief, for floods, fires, all those things. That's Title 32. All training missions and readiness missions inside the United States are under Title 32. And there is one section of code in Title 32 that talks about defunding of a state for failing to meet readiness standards, whether that's they're refusing to get the COVID vaccine, or whether they're refusing to meet training standards, or their officer corps is not trained to the same standard as active duty. If the state fails to meet readiness standards, Section 108 of Title 32 says that the governor can threaten to take their money away, but he has to give them a period to correct their measures and fix themselves. Because
and you bring up the COVID vaccine is a real thing under the Biden administration, right? I don't remember which state.
Oklahoma said they didn't want to vaccinate their National Guard, and the DOD said vaccinate them or you're not going to be compliant and you won't be ready to serve on federal active duty.
And this is something that the New Hampshire Adjutant General cited as an example for how why we could lose funding, right? Anyway, go on.
Yeah, and so what it does, you fail to meet the readiness standard. It's not about disobeying any order or anything. It's just saying you're not ready to serve in a federal capacity should you be called legally. So we're going to take away the money that you used, that you accepted for that readiness. So that's Title 32. Governors in control, serving domestically, but being funded by the federal government. Let me rephrase that. Being funded by the people's money through the federal government. I always want to be accurate there. Now, Title 10, no funding goes to the states for Title 10. But when the National Guard is activated for federal service to repel an invasion, put down an insurrection, or enforce the laws of the Union, or to serve overseas outside of the domestic boundaries of the United States, that's Title 10. Serving in combat is Title 10. Serving overseas in these operations, these joint training missions in Egypt, that's Title 10. Humanitarian service in Greenland might be considered Title 10. In order to be activated on Title 10, there's a section of code. It's Section 12301, 12302, 12406 in Title 10. They give all the reasons that the National Guard can be activated by Congress or by the president. And once that is done, once they're activated, those National Guard troops are de facto active duty. They're no longer members of the state National Guard. They are now active duty Air Force or Army. And what Defend the Guard does is it says, hold on just a minute, before we leave the state, before we leave state control, before we resign from the state National Guard, are you calling us for a purpose to go fight in war overseas? And if you are, do you have the proper authority? Do you have a declaration of war from Congress? Because Title 10 of U.S. Code, Section 12301, Paragraph A, the very, very first authorization to activate the military, says that the National Guard can go and fight in America's wars that have been declared by Congress, right in the code, first paragraph. And so what the governor or the general was saying is that if we don't honor that and we don't go fight wars that are undeclared, that they're going to take away our Title 32 money. There are two different sections of code. One is about readiness and preparation. The other one is about serving and being activated by a proper authority. And so the two don't conflate. They don't mix. It's oil and water. But they use that one section of code in Title 32 to hang their hat on as the reason we would lose funding. And it's just not true. You would lose Title 32 funding if the governor of Idaho said, oh, I know that we fly Black Hawk helicopters in the Army, but we're going to do Cessnas instead. Well, we would lose our Title 32 money. They'd take away all our helicopters, take away all of our uniforms, all of our pay and allowance, because we're not ready to serve in an active component. And so that's the high level difference between Title 10 and Title 32. And the more you read about Title 32 or Title 10, the more you understand that they have really planned out every contingency you can think of why the National Guard would be called into federal service. And they've laid out who has the authority and how they would do it to activate those troops. And what they've done over time is they've just gotten rid of all of them. They bypassed paragraph A, B, C, and gone straight to D, which just says, or other emergencies declared by the president. And that's how they get around the war declaration. They say the president declared an emergency, therefore you have to go. Well, again, I'm a public school guy, Marine, but I do know that A comes before B and B comes before C, and all of those come before D. There's a reason why or other emergencies declared by the president is fourth in line and not first in line, because the highest standard, the highest reason, the most important, the most noble cause, the most heavy-weighted decision is whether or not to go to war, and that's why it's in the first paragraph. And the Supreme Court actually took this up in a decision, a case called Perpich v. Department of Defense, where Governor Perpich, I believe from the state of Minnesota, didn't want his National Guard going into Honduras to build airstrips during Ronald Reagan's administration because he thought that they were going down there not for training and learning how to build airstrips. They were an engineer battalion, but because Reagan was going to use them to invade Central America. And it was a legitimate concern, and that's possibly what it was for. But the Supreme Court said, Mr. Governor, they're going down there for training purposes. Therefore, you do not get the authority to object. And the Supreme Court decision is about overseas training specifically only. And the reason the Supreme Court didn't take up paragraph A, which is a war authorization, is because it was so clearly delineated already that there was no need to address it. It was only training that was questioned, and that's paragraph F. So it's even further down the list. But that's kind of a high level, off the cuff discussion about Title 10 and Title 32. But it just demonstrates that the states, if we don't hold the federal government to the standard, to the rules that they've already passed, to the laws that they have written, if we don't do it as states, who's going to do it? Because if the words are that clear and they don't follow them, when will they?
Why do you think these state adjutant generals, and we're picking a lot on the New Hampshire adjutant general, but this has been consistent with, from what I can see, with adjutant generals across the country, this conflating of these things that you would think they would be in a position to be smart enough to know the difference between. Do you think that it's an intentional conflation to deceive people, or do you think that they themselves are deceived and ignorant and shouldn't be holding these positions because they don't understand how the law works around the guard units that they're supposed to be responsible for?
Yep. So that's a great question. I'll never impugn motive. I'm never going to say what's in somebody's heart, but I will tell you this: the adjutant general is a member of the executive branch of the state. Their boss is the governor, and by extension, the people of that state. The adjutant general also wears another hat. He is a paid government paid lobbyist on behalf of the National Guard Bureau. So when you become an adjutant general, your state pays dues to the National Guard Bureau, and the general becomes the liaison between the Bureau and the states. So in his official capacity as the adjutant general, he serves the state. His job is to execute the orders and the laws that the legislature has passed. But at the same time, he sits in the very same seat with the National Guard Bureau being his grandmaster, I guess would be the way to put it, because you've come up through the military thinking that your boss is the next highest ranked individual, right? The next person in your chain of command. Well, the National Guard Bureau's not in the adjutant general's chain of command, but they treat it as if it is, because most governors have willfully given away their authority as the commander in chief of their own National Guard. And if you really thought about this, Defend the Guard is putting power back in the governor's hands. We're giving them a legislative prohibition to retain control over their own militia. And it's so misunderstood that the adjutant generals, I think, are doing the bidding of the National Guard Bureau, not of the executives of the state. And their job is not to honor and serve and protect and advance the cause of the National Guard Bureau, but they're used as field marshals, as field generals, as field activists lobbying on behalf of the National Guard Bureau's desire to have more money, more equipment, more missions, more purposes, because the National Guard Bureau does one thing, same thing all bureaucrats do. They want to grow. They want to expand their influence. They want to increase their budgets. And you don't get to become a 3-star general. You don't get to become a 2-star general. You don't get to become a 1-star general unless you've kind of come up in the yes man mentality, because at some point you become a politician and not a member of the military anymore. And that's when you put that first star on your collar.
Well, I imagine a lot of governors too are in a similar position, most of the politicians in Congress, which is they don't want to be responsible for making decisions that some people aren't going to like. And so it's imagine even governors, they just want to defer. It's someone else's decision to make. I don't want to make the hard calls, because when you rock the boat, that's when you get people angry at you. And that's when you can lose donors, or someone's not going to vote for you, or this or that. So
Eric, I'll tell you, let me give you an example of when a governor has stood up to the federal government, specifically on an issue like this. And it does come from my state again, Cecil Andrus. By the way, interesting fact, Cecil Andrus was a Democratic governor of Idaho, who has a granddaughter who now serves in the Idaho legislature, who is also the granddaughter of Frank Church. She's the granddaughter of both Frank Church and Cecil Andrus, and she has this incredible bloodline, and she's a supporter of Defend the Guard. But Cecil Andrus is a governor. I told you we have that naval engineering lab, the nuclear lab in southeast Idaho. And I think, if I remember right, it was George W. Bush was going to send train cars full of nuclear waste from Nevada into Idaho to have it processed and buried in southeast Idaho. And Cecil Andrus said, no, not on my watch, you're not. And he posted the National Guard at the border, and he put a state patrolman, big brawny guy with big biceps, big Smokey Bear hat, standing in the middle of the train track at the Utah-Idaho border, and said, you're not bringing that train into my state. And the federal government backed down. The federal government backed down to Cecil Andrus from little old Sagebrush Rebellion, Idaho. And that just shows you the states have more authority than they realize. It just takes a governor with some balls to stand up and do the thing. And that's what we all want. We all want a governor that will stand up for the people. And there are so few of them, so few that will just do the right thing. And we saw that during COVID. We're locking down churches and arresting people for singing in public and going to restaurants. We want a governor that will stand up for our rights, for our freedoms and our liberty.
It's one of the contradictions I think kind of libertarians need to kind of figure out is that, I want a state strong enough to stand up to the tyranny of the federal government, right? We don't want to shrink the power of the states so much that we can't stand up to the federal government, because the federal government is there whether we like it or not.
Right.
And the state is the vehicle we have available to defend our constitutional rights and liberties and our freedoms and paychecks. And it's accessible to the people much more than Washington, D.C. is.
That's right.
So,
and the 10th Amendment does say, and people always forget this part, that all powers and authorities not delegated to the federal government belong to the states, and say it with me, or to the people. The people. And our mechanism for battling the federal government happens to be the state. And if we don't embrace that and we don't welcome that and we don't utilize that and magnify it and multiply it, then we're going to lose it, because the states are just becoming a subordinate of the federal government. And it's our fault.
Yeah.
The government's going to do what government does. It's our fault. We have to reclaim that authority. We have to put a steel spine in our state legislatures.
Yeah. The only way to combat federal authority is to reassert state sovereignty.
That's right.
And that's what we are working to do. And here in New Hampshire, we have a much more libertarian bent to this, but I know that there are a number of states around the country who maybe with less libertarian bents, but are focused on restoring their sovereignty in similar ways. I know Idaho is much more conservative, but it's great to see Idaho and Arizona and various states that are passing Defend the Guard through different chambers. Give us a quick update on what's going on in different states around the country, because I know it's not just New Hampshire where we're seeing some advances here.
Yep. So we just had a hearing in the Senate in Arizona last week, or maybe the week before, where the great Senator Wendy Rogers, Lieutenant Colonel, Air Force veteran, sponsored and pushed to Defend the Guard through the committee again. It's going to pass the Senate again, and it'll go into the House where we have the numbers. We may have that bill on the governor's desk by the time I get back from the New Hampshire Liberty Forum next week. It might be sitting on Governor Katie Hobbs's desk, and that'll be the furthest the bill's advanced so far. In Idaho, we have the numbers in both the Senate and in the House, and we just had a successful hearing in the Senate last Friday. The bill will move through the Senate only if I can provide a path in the House for it to go. And right now we have two senators and a speaker that are like the Spider-Man meme. They're just pointing at each other, trying to figure out who's going to take the hot potato. But I've got, we don't really have a mechanism to discharge to the floor in the House in Idaho that's usable. So I have to go through an unfriendly committee chairman to get there. I've got the numbers on the committee. We've got the numbers on the floor. We've got a veto-proof majority in both houses. I just got to get past a single individual roadblock in Idaho, and we'll be on the desk. Then we've got Tennessee that's looking promising. Texas is coming on strong. Congressman Chip Roy is running for Attorney General down there, and he just did an interview with me where he came out and not only endorsed Defend the Guard, but said he would actively fight it against an overreaching federal authority if they tried to take money away from Texas if they passed it. He said he would defend that all day long. Texas, we have a path through there. We've added Defend the Guard into 7 state GOP party platforms. It's officially part of the party now, which would be exciting.
Part of the platform in Maine, which
that's right.
Which I've heard. I was glad that was my last act in Maine politics was to get that in the platform there, and I've heard that some of my opponents on this issue in the Republican caucus of the Maine Senate are going to be trying to get that removed. So there might be a fight there. But, I'm very excited, actually. We just crowdfunded from our patron community the $800 we needed for the Free State Project to get a booth at the Maine Republican State Convention.
So brilliant.
So I'm going to be there for it. We'll see. And we'll be trying to poach some liberty-minded Republicans to hop the fence and come to New Hampshire if things don't go well in their elections in November at the same time. So
I'll tell you, the hardest thing to do is to remove something from a platform, not to add it, but to remove it from a platform, because all it takes is one person that understands process to object and keep that from being removed.
All right. Well, I won't be able to argue for it from the floor of the convention this go around, so I'll have to find some good people who are who are still, registered to vote in Maine to be delegates and do that. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear the progress that's happening. I said many years ago that I remember when constitutional carry was just starting to get passed state by state. It was like a domino effect, right?
Yep.
You needed a few states to go first and lead, and that empowered other states to follow suit when all the predictions of the kind of the anti-gun folks didn't come true. And it's the same thing with Defend the Guard. It's whoever goes first is going to break the dam. Right? Because every state is scared to be alone going against the federal government because what the federal government might do to them. But one state goes, the sky doesn't fall. You're going to, I think you're going to start seeing a wave of states really start to pass this the moment someone is courageous enough to go first. And I would love it to be New Hampshire with, it would be great historical poetry for New Hampshire to be the first to follow the words of Daniel Webster. But if it's Arizona or Idaho that manages to break through first and empowers, the weak-kneed folks in our New Hampshire Senate to do the right thing eventually, then so be it. But we owe it to our Constitution and to our men and women in uniform to ensure that Constitution is followed.
I agree, and I think that once the first one passes, we could have as many as 25 or 26 in the second and third year. It would spread like wildfire. The numbers are there. The people want it. It's constitutional. I think it would stand up to any Supreme Court challenge, and there's no doubt that once the first one passes, they're going to lead the way. And that's why I want my home state of Idaho to be first. We're building a second home in Arizona. I wouldn't mind them being right along the cusp too, but New Hampshire's right there in my heart because New Hampshire and Maine, they've been there since the beginning of this fight. Yeah.
Well, sadly, Maine is, I don't think going to be there, but at least, not immediately.
We'll get there eventually.
Not with the direction things have gone in Maine, lately. But Dan, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really look forward to seeing you at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. Thank you to Bring Our Troops Home for being one of our sponsors for the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. In particular, you guys are helping us bring in Scott Horton and cover kind of the expenses associated with that. So thank you so much, Dan, and we look forward to seeing you there. Any final words you want to share with our audience before we wrap up today?
Yep. Because we are a grassroots organization, I'm going to encourage everybody watching to go to defendtheguard.us and sign the petition. I know we've done this before and people have heard of this, but sign the petition, add your name to the list, and we will send you a newsletter once a week filled with information. If you can chip in a few bucks, that's how we fund our entire organization. And come see us at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. I'm going to be bringing a kind of a cast iron strong message to Liberty Forum. It's going to be a heavy message. It's going to be durable. And it's going to be about how seriously we should treat the decision to send America to war. And if you're not watching the news, we're going to war. Iran is on the horizon. We just got done with Venezuela thing, I think is what the general called it. And we just need to be ready for the message. I'm going to bring something heavy, and I hope that the people at the Liberty Forum are ready for it. And if you're in the area, if you're within 500 miles, get your butt to the forum. It was incredible last year. And I have no doubt that Scott and Tom and myself and some of the other speakers and Kibby and some of the others are going to do a great job. And if you get the chance to listen to Angela McArdle ever live in person, you have to listen to her. Her message is incredible. It's I can't remember the title of her speech last year, but it was one of the most powerful speeches I've ever heard from a political operative. So get to the Liberty Forum. I'd love to meet you there. Come shake my hand. I'd love to take a picture with you and hear about the fight in your state.
Awesome, Dan. Thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming you.
Thank you.
And I will say, it does pain me that you've chosen to get your second house in Arizona rather than New Hampshire. But just know that you're always welcome in New Hampshire. And if Arizona becomes a sinking ship and the statists take over there, then you're welcome to always in New Hampshire.
Maybe when global warming reaches far enough north that I don't have to tolerate the snow, I might put New Hampshire on the list.
I thought you were like this tough military veteran. Here you're afraid of a little bit of snow. Come on, Dan.
I'm big saucy.
All right, Dan. Well, hopefully we won't have too much snow remaining. We did just get a little bit of snow, though. So there might still be some snow here as of March 5th when the New Hampshire Liberty Forum kicks off, but we'll see. All right, Dan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, that's the show. Become a patron at fsp.org. Sign up for the newsletter. Get your tickets to the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, nhlibertyforum.com. Come see Dan McKnight, Scott Horton, Matt Kibbe, Tom Woods, and so many more. Get your tickets, nhlibertyforum.com. Use my discount code Pork Report. Save a few bucks. Save 5%. My gift to you is a thank you for being in our audience and supporting the show. Furthermore, everyone, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.